think you understand, but you don't understand," he cried. "What you say can't be done, can be done. You're a liar. You cannot be so definite without missing something vague and fine. You miss the whole point. The lives of people are like young trees in a forest. They are being choked by climbing vines. The vines are old thoughts and beliefs planted by dead men. I am myself covered by crawling, creeping vines that choke me." He laughed bitterly. "And that's why I want to run and play," he said. "I want to be a leaf blown by the wind over the hills. I want to die and be born again. And I am only a tree covered with vines and slowly dying. I am, you see, weary and want to be made clean. I am an amateur venturing timidly into lives," he concluded. "I am weary and want to be made clean. I am covered by creeping, crawling things." A woman from Iowa came here to Chicago and took a room in a house on the west side. She was about 27 years old, and ostensibly she came to the city to study advanced methods for teaching music. A certain young man also lived in the West Side house. His room faced a long hall on the second floor of the house, and the one taken by the woman was across the hall facing his room. In regard to the young man, there is something very sweet in his nature. He is a painter, but I have often wished he would decide to become a writer. He tells things with understanding, and he does not paint brilliantly. And so the woman from Iowa lived in the West Side house and came home from the city in the evening. She looked like 1,000 other women one sees in the streets every day. The only thing that at all made her stand out among the women in the crowds was that she was a little lame. Her right foot was slightly deformed, and she walked with a limp. For 3 months she lived in the house, where she was the only woman except the landlady. And then a feeling in regard to her began to grow up among the men in the house. The men all said the same thing concerning her. When they met in the hallway at the front of the house, they stopped, laughed, and whispered. "She wants a lover," they said, and winked. "She may not know it, but a lover is what she needs." One knowing Chicago and Chicago men would think that an easy one to be satisfied. I laughed when my friend, whose name is Leroy, told me the story. But he did not laugh. He shook his head. "It wasn't so easy," he said. "There would be no story were the matter that simple." Leroy tried to explain. "Whenever a man approached her, she became alarmed," he said. "Men kept smiling and speaking to her. They invited her to dinner and to the theatre, but nothing would induce her to walk in the streets with a man. She never went into the streets at night. When a man stopped and tried to talk with her in the hallway, she turned her eyes to the floor and then ran into her room. Once, a young dry goods clerk who lived there induced her to sit with him on the steps before the house. He was a sentimental fellow, and took hold of her hand. When she began to cry, he was alarmed and arose. He put a hand on her shoulder and tried to explain. But under the touch of his fingers, her whole body shook with terror. "Don't touch me!" she cried. "Don't let your hands touch me!" She began to scream, and people passing in the street stopped to listen. The dry goods clerk was alarmed and ran upstairs to his own room. He bolted the door and stood listening. "It is a trick," he declared in a trembling voice. "She is trying to make trouble. I did nothing to her. It was an accident. And anyway, what's the matter? I only touched her arm with my fingers." Perhaps a dozen times, Leroy has spoken to me of the experience of the Iowa woman in the West Side house. The men there began to hate her. Although she would have nothing to do with them, she would not let them alone. In 100 ways, she continually invited approaches that, when made, she repelled. When she stood naked in the bathroom, facing the hallway where the men passed up and down, she left the door slightly ajar. There was a couch in the living room downstairs, and when men were present, she would sometimes enter, and without saying a word, throw herself down before them. On the couch